Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor David Proser of Kempsville Conservative Synagogue, Kehillat Bet HaMidrash in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this is the Torah portion for Shabbat of Saturday, August 29th, 2020, corresponding to the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Elul in the year 5780. We thank Rabbi Michael Gold, Rabbi Joyce Newmark, Rabbi Joseph Prowser, and the United Synagogue Torah Sparks series for their comments, publications, and teachings on this week's Parsha. This Shabbat, August 29th, we read the Parsha of KI-TETZE in the book of Devarim, which begins on page 1112 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 840 of the Hertz. Using different ways of counting mitzvot, we find either 72 or 74 in this Parsha. Of all the mitzvot, this is more than 10% of the 613 in the Torah, and by tradition, more mitzvot in this Parsha than in any other Parsha of the Torah. Our Parsha opens with three difficult laws. First, recognizing a harsh reality of war, laws are given regulating the treatment of a woman that a man sees, desires, and captures in war. Using our 2020 thinking and sensibilities, we may consider this a barbaric practice, and perhaps part of it was, but it was the regular practice at that time. And so the Torah took it up a notch. It raised the bar by providing standards of how that woman was to be treated before she could be taken as a wife or concubine. Next, the Parsha addresses the relationship between a man and his two wives, one beloved and the other who used to be but is now hated, including the rights of the firstborn son of the now unloved wife. Continuing with the topic of family relationships, we are given laws for dealing with a stubborn and rebellious son. Further laws are given addressing legal categories, including judicial hangings. From this, we get our custom of burying the dead as quickly as possible from the Parsha's directive that a corpse may not be kept out all night. Continuing, we have laws about the return of lost property, the obligation to assist the owner of an animal that has fallen under its burden, the prohibition against wearing clothing of the opposite sex, the commandment to chase off a mother bird before taking its eggs or its young, and the reward for fulfilling this imperative, the requirement to build a railing around your roof and to remove safety hazards from your property. Mixtures of certain types are prohibited, such as sowing a vineyard with diverse species, plowing with an ox and an ass yoked together, and shatnez, wearing wool and linen combined in one garment. The commandment to wear fringes, laws about slander, the procedure followed when a newlywed husband alleges his wife was not a virgin as claimed, and the consequences of such claims. If the claim is false, the husband is flogged, fined, and prohibited from divorcing her. If the claim is true, the woman is put to death. The legal ramifications of adultery and rape and a variety of marital restrictions. Conduct and sanitation in a military camp. Keeping the camp holy would later be expanded into a general mandate to establish worthy communities. Those who may not be admitted to the congregation of the Lord are specified. The treatment to be accorded an escaped slave is listed. Cult prostitution is forbidden. Sexual conduct deemed immoral and therefore prohibited is spelled out. Further, we have the prohibition against usury, mandates about vows, the legal parameters guiding someone working in a vineyard or a field of crops, the fundamental laws of divorce, the special obligations and military exemption attending the first year of marriage, the securing of a debt, the legal treatment of kidnapping, the authority of priests in cases of leprosy, the commandment to remember God's punishment of Miriam after her ill-advised criticism of Moshe, the fair treatment of laborers and the obligation to provide prompt payment of wages to workers. Fundamental legal principles are addressed, such as individual responsibility, the principle that people are punished only for their own sins, not the sins of their parents or children, and the obligation to deal justly with the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. The obligation to provide justice for society's most vulnerable finds specific expression in the requirement to leave forgotten sheaves and gleanings for the desperate poor. A maximum of 40 lashes is established in cases of judicial flogging. Concern for animals is given expression through a prohibition against muzzling a plow animal at work, keeping it from eating. The law of levirate marriage and its circumvention by the ritual of chalitza is introduced. Harsh consequences are provided in the case of a woman who violently intervenes in her husband's physical altercation with another man. The requirement of honest weights and measures and the more general principle of integrity and commerce are detailed. The Parsha concludes with the requirement of Zachor et asher asa lacha Amalek b'derech b'tzeitechem mimitzrayim. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt. That militant nation's merciless attack on the weakest parts of the Israelite camp. Israel is told to blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. These final verses are read as the maftir on Shabbat Zachor, just before Purim. The Haftorah for this Shabbat is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verses 1 to 10, beginning on page 1138 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 857 of the Hertz. Just as in the past few weeks, we continue the pattern of this Haftorah not being connected to this week's Torah portion of KI-TETZE by theme. Rather, it was chosen as the fifth of 7 Haftorahs of consolation that follow Tisha B'Av. The overall message of this week's Haftorah is the everlasting mercy of God. It contains a number of promises and assurances to Zion and its inhabitants. The prophet addressed them to the destroyed city and nation sometime after Cyrus of Persia conquered Babylon and allowed subjected populations, including the Judeans, to renew their ancient heritages. Because Zion soon would be rebuilt and repopulated, the prophet urges a personified Zion to rejoice. Testimony of assurance comes with a new covenant of reconciliation with the people, as it's compared to God's ancient pact with Noah after the flood. Just as that ancient oath promised the end of universal destruction, so Zion is now promised the end of divine punishment. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos. As always, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, please like, and feel free to comment below. Good Shabbos.